I'd like to call the Rules and City Government Committee meeting to order. Please note for the record, Alderman Arnett, Alderman Savage are in attendance. So the committee is here. First on our agenda is approval of the minutes from February 13th. Can I get a motion?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. On our agenda, the first item is 0818, which is adequate public facilities. But in light of the fact that that public hearing has been left open, we will not hear testimony or have any discussion on that legislation until the public hearing has been closed. So the next item on our agenda is 01018, Police Advisory Board, for the purpose of establishing the Police Advisory Board. I see two of our esteemed officers in hand. Major, would you step forward? And Mr. Dennis, would you like to join him? We had some brief discussion about this last night at the council meeting, and so thank you for being there to help clarify to the community what the purpose of this legislation is. Yes, so tell us where we are or where we should be on this legislation.
Well, as we indicated last night, the purpose of the legislation is to allow community input into the chief's decisions for crime suppression, for policy.
Is your mic on?
Sorry. To allow the community to give input to the chief of police for policy suggestions, for crime suppression initiatives, and to communicate community concerns directly to the police chief. It also is an opportunity for the chief to in turn give his ideas back to the community, to allow the community members to communicate back to their communities and to your constituents issues of concern to the chief. The principal issue that we wanted to lay at rest was the distinction between an advisory board and a review board. This is not a review board. This would simply be advisory. They wouldn't have any legal authorities beyond just communication to the police chief. That's the idea behind the board. And one of the key components of it is the chief wants to ensure that it's a broad array of people, and he's insistent, as I said last night, he's insistent that it be constituents that disagree with him about things so that he can get a good shaking out of policy decisions that he's making. So that's the idea.
And as I said at the meeting, I was surprised that we didn't hear from the, forget, what was it called? It was a
the
consensus.
Caucus of African American Leaders?
Well, it was more than that, though, because we had ACLU, we had a whole bunch of people in there, and they gave us their findings, and one of them was to recommend for a civilian review board.
I think that came from the caucus, though.
Right, okay.
But the ACLU was part of the caucus's.
So I'm
discussion.
assuming by their lack of attendance that they're comfortable with this. It may not mean that they've given up on having the other, but and again, as I said last night, there was initially a lot of activity on the social media, but it seems to have gone away. So again, I'm taking that to mean a comfort level on the part of everybody with us proceeding with this. I mean, the worst can happen is we try it and it doesn't work for somebody, and we either change it or abandon it. But
Indeed.
if the chief wants it, I think we ought to try to accommodate that.
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, originally I was leaning towards kind of opposing this just simply because I think I would like something more robust. But after speaking with the chair yesterday, it helped me kind of understand it better, if I think of it more as a supplement, as in addition to anything else we may do down the line, because I do want to have a discussion at some point about the potential of a review board, or even something like a civilian review board, civilian-led policing, something along those lines. But this, I think, could be seen as a supplement, perhaps, to things. But I still wonder if who should be the appointing, if it should be the chief who selects or the council that would select the members of this board.
It's the chief's position that he should select, and the reason he wants that is he doesn't want it to be a political decision. He wants it to be a decision that complements his understanding of community issues and his ability to communicate his policy decisions back to the community. Indeed, his position would be that political officials already have a means of communicating directly with their constituents, and he didn't want to create blurred lines of communication.
You know, on that, I can understand where you're coming from, Rob. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can always come back and revisit it, but this may not be the final way we go anyway in terms of having the review board. So, and actually I'm interested in doing this as quickly as possible so that we can start getting some of the benefit under our belts.
Yeah, because that is, I have run this by a few of my constituents, and that is kind of the one impression that they have is that, oh, again, the police chief picking the people who are going to be giving him the feedback. I think if that is the direction the department and the committee want to go, I think it warrants more explanation to the public that, you know, like what Alderman Arnett is saying, this is sort of on a trial basis, see how it works, and it is meant to kind of provide more information to the police chief. Because right now, the community doesn't really have a venue to give voice to their views except through the council or the public safety committee. So I can definitely see some added benefit to this.
Actually, looking at the code, it doesn't really, there's nothing about how there will be advertising or making people aware that positions are being filled. Is it anticipated that there will be like notices going out to community associations, or how will you let people know that the chief is interested in volunteers to be on this board?
It is our intention to publicly announce it, and announce it through social media, through print media. The purpose of the selection process, the reason it wasn't specified in the draft statute was because the chief wanted the flexibility. He didn't want to constrain his ability to select a broad array of people. And the thought was that if it were in the ordinance itself, that could constrain rather than enhance the ability to select a broader array of people.
But I think the pushback to that would be that people might feel that they won't have an opportunity to be selected. And so I guess in retrospect and listening to you, Rob, maybe we could consider an amendment that would prescribe some of the ways. I mean, for example, is the board already filled?
No.
When would you start? When would the chief start selecting people, and is that just on a hearsay basis, or does he have people in mind already?
He does not have any specific people in mind already. He does have a general idea of which communities he would want to draw from: geographic, economic, political. As I say, he wants a broad array of people. The purpose of it is to give him a better idea. It's a two-way communication. It's his opportunity to inform community leaders, to send them through the Citizens Police Academy, for example, to acquaint them with the disciplinary process of the police department, to allow them to ride along, to see firsthand how officers do their job, so that those community leaders can go back to their community and communicate that. And it's also the opportunity for those people to obviously inform our decisions. So it's more of a communication mechanism than anything else. It's an opportunity for us to hear directly from the community without, frankly, political agendas or other things afoot, but just how people want their communities policed. That's the idea.
Major, let me ask, because I'm looking at the language, and it speaks to electing a chair and a vice chair, which gives it another level of formality than a simple communication mechanism. What will their roles be as far as leading this discussion, or as far as gathering the information that the chief is seeking?
That's an excellent question. The direction of the ordinance was to just give structure to the decision-making process. Typically, when you have those sorts of organizations, as we all well know, there tends to be one or two people that dominate a conversation. The idea in giving it
Good or bad?
Well, indeed.
I think dominate already gives you the idea.
That can work for us and that can work against us. But the idea was to give structure to the conversation so that, but to allow that group itself to generate its own spontaneous, organic organizational principles, but using general, Robert's Rules of Order, that kind of thing. So the idea was to give enough specificity to the organization without constraining them to what we think they ought to decide. So they are going to be given the broad latitude to communicate the way they like, but we think it's important that there be some structure to it so that there aren't just dominant voices that drown out the others.
So would the chief be invited in by the chair for meetings? Would the chief, my other question was going to be about the chief's participation. I'm not sure whether it speaks to how regular the meetings will be held, but he is the chief. He's got an awful lot of other responsibilities also, and the likelihood that he takes a vacation, like right now, he may not be available all the time. So does the major pick up with that group, or?
Yes.
Because it speaks specifically to the chief, not a designee.
Right. It probably could be a little better worded, I suppose, but the idea is the chief and/or his designee. In a lot of the things that we generate in the police department, we sort of, and this is where we could use your input or the community's input, we always take it for granted that if the chief isn't there, then I fill in. If I'm not there, then one of the captains fills in. We're a very hierarchical organization, and so we often take it for granted that it's understood that those things, it may not be understood. So that's actually a good example of where community input would be valuable in how we generate public correspondence.
It does speak to the chief or his designee on page 2, line 9, under duties. And I guess I didn't see it under where we're establishing the group. But you understand the point I'm making.
Yes.
The chief's not always available, so
Right.
is the designee automatically?
Let me try this out on the committee. Under section 248, 510, composition, the advisory board shall consist of 10 uncompensated members selected by the police chief. The members shall be a diverse group of Annapolis residents. Each member shall serve on the board for 3 years. And maybe a new paragraph or certainly a new sentence. Membership shall be solicited through a variety of methods, including social media and direct solicitation from civic organizations. Something like that kind of implies that it's going to be an open solicitation. The chief will be the selecting agent, but that we want to let everyone know that this is that members are being solicited through a variety of means. So I don't think it constrains the chief in terms of making the selection, but I do think that it gives the notion that we're trying to be open in our recruitment of members.
Alderman?
Thank you. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And on that, I do have a question though, because I have seen some emails and posts on social media asking for people to start a training, I believe it is. Is that related? Is that in preparation for this?
It's not,
board?
they're two separate things, but it is the intention of the chief to send every one of the people on the advisory committee to go through the Citizens Police Academy, but they are two separate programs. The Citizens Police Academy is just an effort to acquaint the public
Okay.
with the specifics of police work.
Okay. And Alderman Arnett, like I said, I think that's a good idea. And what about having some kind of requirement that there be ward representation? Not necessarily political, but I think I could certainly see benefit to making sure we have representation from each of the wards, and maybe even having some kind of connection with the alderman, not necessarily appointed, but communication line open between entities or individuals.
So we're talking a body of 10 people. So you're suggesting that there be a representative from each of the 8 wards also? Or
I guess
as a way
I
of
would-
defining those 10 people?
What it says in here, right now as it reads, shall be a diverse group of Annapolis residents. And it leaves the discretion about the geographic location to the chief. I think if he's finding that he has various areas that he needs to hear more from than others, and he also wants some diversity of opinion within those areas. I mean, maybe he'll want to have 3 people that happen to come from Ward 6, but they represent different kinds of thinking. I'm as much worried that 10 isn't enough as I am getting it, but again, I'm willing to let this go out and try it out, and we can always come back. If you're finding it's not working, you can always come back and say, we need a tweak, and we'll do it. I kind of like that we're doing it by ordinance. I think that's a good idea. I think it gives it a firmer establishment because it's now in code. But I'm wary. We're making progress by doing this, I feel, and I'm wary about gilding the lily with too many embellishments on our part until we see how it works. So I would recommend that one sentence, which I can read again, because I've already reorganized it.
Okay, go ahead.
So we would add a sentence at the end of that section: membership shall be solicited through a variety of methods, including direct solicitation from civic organizations, but also through the use of social media as appropriate.
May I add civic and community? Is that redundant? I was trying to think of social, it's not quite.
I mean, it depends upon how many adjectives you want to use.
Well, I mean, we're talking different groups. When I think of civic, I think of one set of
Like
groups.
ECA.
Well, that's a civic organization,
Right.
but so are fraternities, civic organizations.
Mhm.
But
And
then there
maybe
are
we want
community
peerless around.
organizations. ECA would fit as, they
Right.
represent a certain,
I don't have, so
Um,
civic or community organizations?
that's what I'm thinking. I'm not sure. It says a diverse group,
Right.
So,
Well, let's see if we can, we're not particularly interested in having business organizations, are we? Or are we?
well, would there be another opportunity for businesses to weigh in? Was there a discussion about business?
There have been a number of
Communication.
discussions. I guess our position would be, we would be hesitant to want to constrain too much
Right.
ahead of time, the entry requirements. To the gentleman's point, that we could always tighten it up later if we found that that wasn't the case. In fact, that was one of the reasons to make it an ordinance, was to allow, if in your judgment, your collective judgment, you thought that it wasn't effective, or if the feedback you're getting through the political channels was that you thought things needed to be added, we could always revisit it and add it later.
I like your word community better, because a business organization is a community organization. So community, I think, is broader than civic, and it gives the chief more latitude.
Okay.
So I would make the motion I don't know if you got it, Tanika, or not, but we add a sentence, membership shall be solicited through a variety of methods, including direct solicitation from community organizations and through the use of social media as appropriate.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 I have a question about page 2, line 27, 2.48.530B. The board may adopt bylaws and rules and regulations as it deems necessary and desirable for the regulation and conduct of its meetings and activities. That again seems to be taking us into another level of responsibility. Can you share with me why they need their own bylaws? Robert's Rules is a general process for conducting business, so what else is necessary?
I see your point about the word bylaws. That might be a bit fussy. The intent of it was to just create the ability of them to self-organize, to create their own communication processes, their own rules of order. But I see your point that bylaws sort of suggests a quasi-legal construct. So maybe perhaps that's not the best word to put in there.
What do you guys think about having bylaws in there?
I agree with you. I think since they don't have any quasi-judicial powers, or really, they're simply advisory, and I think our other boards who are advisory, they don't have formal bylaws adopted. They often do have procedures that they follow.
So what if we deleted the term bylaws and, so they would adopt rules and regulations as they deem necessary in order to conduct their meetings?
So it would be officers hyphen bylaws?
No, the board may adopt rules and procedures as it deems necessary,
Okay. So
without the need for
the
bylaws.
new title would be rules and procedures, and point A would be elect officers, point B would adopt rules and procedures.
Yeah. So the title, line 22, would be rules and procedures.
Right. That makes sense. Second?
So we're deleting bylaws from line 22 and replacing with
Right.
rules and procedures.
Officers and bylaws, so we'll do rules and procedures.
Right. And then eliminate bylaws and, Takia, are you keeping up? Under line 22, yeah.
22, we delete
And-
officers and bylaws.
No, officers would remain the same, because in line A, we're
But
doing,
officers would be part of the rules and procedures.
well, A is a chair and vice chair, so they're the officers.
So that's rules, well, I don't care. I just thought you could be a little more efficient, just say officers are part of the rules and procedures, but we got Brian on the clock here.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessary to take officers out, just
Fine. No, okay.
to add rules and procedures under line 22, and to delete bylaws and on line 27.
Are you changing it to rules and procedures rather than rules?
Rules and regulations, no, rules and regulations.
Okay.
And, I mean, do you have an issue with rules and
No,
regulations?
just we're saying rules and procedures in the title, and then we're saying rules and regulations.
Right,
I like procedures better.
okay, so we want to change regulations to procedures, rules and procedures.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, do you have, is that good with you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Did you expect you were going to get all of this tinkering?
So under B, it would read, the board may adopt rules and procedures as it deems necessary, ... Okay. Was it moved and seconded?
Yes.
Okay,
You moved it and then I seconded
okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anything else that, Alderman?
Yes, thank you. Another idea, to have them, to put something in the code where they have to report maybe annually or quarterly to either the council or the public safety committee on their, what they've recommended, how everything's been going with them, how they feel the board is functioning, and same thing, invite the police department in to report perhaps.
I guess, I would assume that the chief would automatically report to the city manager about what's going on here, and that, to the extent that anything is going on that's noteworthy, the city manager would report it to us. I'm just wondering whether the chief would feel that we're being a little heavy-handed, but maybe you can tell us.
It would be our preference to allow us, with the current construct, to try that first, and if there were a reason to report out later, perhaps do that. It would be my concern, it would be our concern collectively that there's an element of, I don't want to say confidentiality, that's not, of candor, I suppose, that we would want the communities to give to us that may not exist if it were to be reported out.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm wondering how to balance that out with having transparency. Maybe having an annual report with the other boards and commissions, perhaps, a written report where you can be a bit more selective with
It was our hope that the transparency would come from the community members themselves. They're in no way constrained in communicating with whomever they like. Their perceptions on how it's working or not. I guess the concern would be if we formalize that reporting, the candor might be affected.
How about this as an alternative? How about if we sunset this, say after 2 years? That should be enough time to see whether it's working, and if it's working, and then this could be made permanent. If it's not working, we'll have a thing where it's automatically opened up for review by the council.
Well, so I guess it would be up to the public safety committee to
To ask
invite the
question.
members to the
Mhm.
committee meeting to assess
Right.
its effectiveness, because otherwise I'm wondering how are we going to know if it's effective? We're going to have to rely on the city manager, I suppose.
I have a feeling we'll know.
Yeah, I do too.
As do
Anything
I.
controversial, I bet we're going to hear about.
Are the meetings open to the public?
The meetings between the chief and the members is not going to be open to the public as a general order, but they may have open meetings, town hall meetings, that sort of thing. But it was the chief's hope that, to that issue of candor, that there could be a rapport between them, that they would freely share information. And it also occurs to me that if the communication mechanism between the community and the chief is one of the many is this vehicle, to have them report as a group using their procedures and their rules changes the message, subtly but substantially. For example, I mean, if one of the members of this group were to contact you directly as a constituent, they're much more likely to give a lot more information, a lot more unvarnished information directly to you, or for that matter to their community, or for that matter to social media, than they would in a formal, periodic, voted upon, amended, I just worry that begins to ossify the communication mechanism.
So you kind of said it yourself. The meetings will not be open to the public, but public meetings can be held.
Right, exactly.
So that could be a C under the rules and procedures.
Do we really want to put that in there, though, as language?
I think we're monkeying with this way too much myself at this point, but
Well,
I think Rob does raise a valid question, and it hadn't occurred to me that these would not be open meetings. And I can understand why they wouldn't be, but I think that also raises some suspicion.
I don't think there's anything wrong with there being a report annually like other groups. And that report doesn't have to specifically give types of information that may be considered confidential or sensitive, but to simply outline the types of activities that have been brought to the chief to be addressed. Whether it's crime, not alternatives to crime, but, well, I guess alternatives too, but from strategies for dealing with crime I just think there's a way to share with us information about how well it's working without sacrificing the confidentiality that has been created between the chief and these members.
The chief can do that without disclosing that it's coming from this group, though, right, when he comes to the public safety committee.
Yeah, I guess he could. I don't know, to be honest with you.
At this point, I think we're
But
monkeying with this enough that I'd almost want to send this back to the chief to see what his feelings are on this and postpone action.
have we deviated too far from the original?
Not so far, no.
Okay.
I would hasten to point out that these are volunteers. They don't take any oath of office. They don't work for us. They're free to communicate in whatever manner. They're not under any confidentiality obligation. But when we create a report, it creates it's a very different dynamic than an open, free. So nothing about this process would preclude these individual citizens from speaking their mind in whatever format they prefer.
The more I think about it, the more I do really think that these need to expressly be open to the public. Because I'm thinking about our other boards and commissions in the city. They're all open to the public unless there's a specific hearing before the Ethics Commission or the Civil Service Board. Some of those hearings are closed, but those are closed for really legal reasons. In this case, I don't know if you really have sufficient justification to close them off because, as you said, these aren't going to be dealing with disciplinary complaints, so to speak. It's more about, and I think one of the goals of setting this up is to increase the trust, or improve the trust between the police department and the public. And I think that if we treat it like another board, the public can come, but they can't necessarily testify. It's going to be the board members who are the ones who are able to have that dialogue with the chief, but the public can sit in if they want and can at least observe the process.
Well, these wouldn't be mutually exclusive options. On the one hand, we could have, there's a group dynamic that occurs in an open meeting that's very different from a more candid exchange that could be had with the chief and some trusted people that they get to know one another, they get to realize the boundaries of, civility, for example, that some people are, have a higher tolerance for bluntness than others. Those sorts of subtle human interactions that can occur with a group of people that work together for a while. But there isn't anything about this structure that would preclude having open meetings.
Well, that's why I like this thing that I said, meetings will not be open to the public, but public meetings can be held.
Exactly. Right.
So I can see where you're having this meeting in a room, you're all with the group, and somebody says, we got this going on, and somebody else who may not want to disclose it in public says, and that's really getting bad in my neighborhood, and we kind of know who it is, and we need to be heading this off at the pass, whereas they might not want to do that if it's for public consumption.
That's a good example, yes.
So maybe we can, I just think we need to try it. Maybe we can have it both ways. If the group feels that they need to have an open meeting, maybe to solicit more general input, they're free to do it, but they have the protection of not having an open meeting. And as Major says, if they want, they're not constrained from going out and talking about what happens at these things. They'll be the judge of what they want to talk about with other people in the public.
Well, what about erring on the side of of the public transparency, and then we could always come back, and if there's there's demonstrated need that the meetings need to be more closed in nature, then we can change that, or even insert language where they're by default public but are allowed to have closed meetings to discuss particular matters.
I think we're confusing the term board. This, to me, this is not the type of board that fits into the other parameters. This is a group that the chief wants to pull together to give him ideas and suggestions about things.
Without it necessarily being broadcast until it gets a
Right.
chance to be fleshed out. Because it could be the advisory group would say, no, I think that's a terrible idea, and the chief say, forget I ever said it.
So I would be hesitant to change what his philosophy is for this particular group. And maybe board is not the correct term. But I think making it more formal brings into play what you're talking about. And I don't think that's his intent.
Well put, well put.
So you're saying change it to police advisory group?
Well, I mean, we can keep the term board, it's semantics, you know. But I don't want us to misinterpret this as one of our council boards or boards and commissions, because this doesn't fit into that category. This is not something the mayor's staff is going to oversee, for example. You know, so this doesn't go to the boards and commissions person to make sure it's staffed. The chief is doing this because this is his little thing, or a big thing, whatever it is.
It may be worth it then to change the term. I know it's just semantics, but it may help create that separation.
You have a suggestion? Oh, I'm sorry.
We were just wondering if committee was a better word than board.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
Or council.
Or council.
Yeah.
Police advisory council.
Yeah, I like council, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm partial to council.
Actually, that sort of connotes, you know, a federated group where they go back and report out to the, that's actually a nice word.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So do we want to make that motion that we change?
Do we change board to
So
council?
we just changed everything. We even changed your title. I mean, really. Police Advisory Council.
He's going to kill me when he gets back.
See what happens when he goes away on vacation.
right.
Um,
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So what about the sunset language? Do we want to
No,
keep it?
let's not do it.
Okay.
Well,
Let's let it.
I'm just wondering, would you be willing to compromise to require at least, just to go back to the reporting, if we don't want to necessarily make these public, so to speak, can we at least get some kind of report? Well, I guess that would kind of conflate the two boards as well.
I think
I
it's
think we can expect the chief to give a summary of these kinds of things
We could
to
just call them in if we want to get that.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure Rhonda will want to be asking him about this from time to time, and so I don't think we need to formalize it, but we'll see. If we don't hear from them for 9 months, we might say, hey, whatever happened to the council, the advisory council? I get this point about the chill of it's going to be attributed to you, and the people are going to be sitting here watching to make sure you're not ratting them out or whatever it is. I don't think we want to put that pall on it. I did like this idea, though, of I think we should be expressed that they are not open to the public, because people might, Nevin Young might say, hey, I want to go to those meetings. I want to see what they're doing. So, I mean, I think it could be something where we would add not open to the public, but they can hold public meetings if that's in their interest.
Well, I think it's difficult to go back after you've done something, to rescind it or to eliminate it. I like giving it a sunset, because at some point it causes us to reevaluate it. We may do nothing, or if the chief doesn't like it, then it can be eliminated, but it's part of the process.
Right.
So I would support saying that it'll sunset after 2 years, or to be, what's your
We-
language, to be
usually we
reevaluated
s-
after 2 years?
Usually we say, it will, I forget how, it will go on unless after 2 years the council rescinds it or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's an automatically permanent unless the council takes affirmative action to make changes.
So that gives him I don't want to say an option, let's just say, if it doesn't go quite the way he had hoped, then it can sunset.
Okay.
So, Takia, can you come up with the language that speaks to something that will, well,
The language usually
end at a
reads
certain
something like
date.
this becomes permanent after 2 years unless the council takes affirmative actions to rescind or amend.
so. Okay.
Sunsets usually automatically rescind,
Right.
So
And
then
change.
we'd have to take an
Renew,
action.
yes.
Okay, so sunset is not the correct term.
Okay, sun up then.
it'd be yeah, sunrise.
Uh,
How about the sunny side over?
Okay, but you get the gist of what we're looking for. So is there a motion to support the concept of,
Some
ending
automatic
unless-
review after 2 years.
yes,
Yes, I move that, whatever the language is we come up, but I'm sensitive to the fact we've got,
I know, Brian, I'm
Brian.
sorry, Brian. Okay, second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anything else? Did you have another amendment there? We're not doing
no,
another one? Okay.
I'm gonna leave it alone. They'll never come
Okay.
back if we.
I
go-
know. Okay, so, 01018 now has 3 amendments. Takia, can you share with us, or do you guys remember?
I
Ross, you
remember.
have them.
Well, the first one was about the solicitation for membership.
Okay.
I can't remember what the second one was. Oh, changing the name to council.
Now changing eliminating bylaws.
Right, right. So there's 4 amendments. Well,
Mhm.
also, there were the changes from board to council,
Okay.
okay?
And then the last one would be the sunset, for lack of a better description.
Right.
So that's 4 or 5?
It's 9.
No, I can count that way. Okay,
Right.
any other discussion?
So we'll
On
recommend favorably to the council with these
01018.
amendments.
Favorable recommendation with those 5 amendments?
Second.
Okay, all in
Okay.
favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Mr. Dennis, did you have something you wanted to add about this legislation?
No, ma'am. Except, well, I will say this, I think it's an excellent idea. Certainly the department is moving toward integrity, transparency is very important now within law enforcement generally, not only here in Annapolis. So I think it's a good step forward. I think it's a good start to making us one with the community, so we have one Annapolis.
Good,
Okay,
good. Thank you.
well, thank you. And we note that there's nothing that speaks to disciplinary or anything that would be in the purview of the professional standards.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, I must profess that I've had some discussions on and off with Brian Paquin, and he has had discussions with his boss
Yeah,
and the
thank you,
city
gentlemen.
manager. Yeah, thank you. So he has a quick
Mr.
statement,
Paquin, you want to come up?
quick update to give us, and so I would move that we move to 01218 and come back to 01118. Brian, I can't believe how fast I can flip through it now that you laid hands on my,
All takes, man.
Okay, so you're here to speak on O-1218, boards, commissions, committees, and authorities, attendance at meetings. And this legislation would allow board, commissions, committees, and authorities to attend
He's here to
meetings
speak,
via telephone conference.
he's here to speak to technical aspects and feasibility.
I think the part I'm here to speak on is a little narrower than the potential legislation itself. Just want to give you a little bit of an update. Mark Hildebrand, who's running the TV studio, and myself are working towards a solution for your absence that will hopefully be deemed sufficient for however long that you're out. As Ross alluded to, he and I had a decent conversation today regarding the possibilities of, I guess, I mean, the way I understood it, maybe broader legislation allowing these sorts of things in other boards and committee meetings or what have you. Can't really speak to that directly, but it's our opinion, the IT department's opinion, that in order to, the in-house IT department's not really equipped to design or implement a broader, a solution that would be suitable for a broader application outside of your specific one. We would recommend that, we draw up a list of requirements, put it out for RFP and set it up as a capital project, as a council chamber improvement or what have you, if we were going to go down that road.
It's a much bigger investment, it's much more complicated. So they do have a Skype-type solution. You will be there in the form of a 40-inch screen, and they will have things at your house.
Well, that's one thing.
That's one thing.
Okay, so let's do one at a time, if that's what
So
you
the
want.
technology for a broader application that would allow this to be pervasive across all boards and commissions is not extant at this point.
Okay, so in order to make this room compatible with equipment that would allow any board or commission member to call in, does not exist.
It exists, but we don't have a plan for it, and it's very expensive.
Well, it doesn't exist as far as the city of
No, we
Annapolis.
don't.
It is in current facilities, no ma'am, it does not
Okay.
currently exist. Now, as far as a telephone call, is that, are we simply talking about a telephone call, or are we talking about video conferencing? Because there was some discussion regarding, what was the legal term or whatever that you used before, Ross, as far as being able to see facial expressions, things of that nature?
Yeah, to be able to see people's expressions and body language and that sort of thing. I mean, to cut to the chase, I really am not in favor of this legislation. I am in favor of a resolution to provide a feasible, right now, solution for your circumstances. And I think besides the technical limitations of this, I think we really need to talk about the desirability of making this available. I can see Fred wanting to stay at home with his Diet Pepsi and be able to run to the bathroom whenever he wants and never show up here again. But I think there are other solutions to the problems the boards and commissions has, like filling them with all of the vacancies so that they have a pool of people. So what I drew from my conversation with Brian is we can make it to take care of you in a way that is going to be comfortable for you as well. But we don't have the facility to make this a generally available option where you could have even more than one person not being at the port wardens for a hearing.
Okay, so let's we have two different issues. We have my issue and we have this legislation in
Right.
front of us. Let's deal with this legislation. From what I'm hearing, we do not have the capacity nor the financial wherewithal to make this legislation work for us, meaning to give members of boards and commissions to participate via teleconference or anything like
Right.
that. Brian,
it-
am I,
As the council chamber facilities exist at this very moment, no, ma'am, we do not.
okay.
And it's the position of the IT department that if there were a desire to implement something like that, that we would want to hire that out, have it professionally designed, built. Quite frankly, I'd be looking for some advice. I'd be looking at, you know, how do other municipalities handle that, if they handle it at all. That sort of thing, you know, take our time and really do it correctly. So, yeah, and again, it sounds like there's some discussion of, you know, logistics from your perspective as well, but from a strictly technical perspective, no. As the council chamber facilities exist now, that is not a possibility to do video conferencing in that manner.
And all of our boards and commissions are required by code to meet in this room.
Right.
So there is no other option for that. Alderman?
Some of them meet in the Gorman Street building now.
And some of them meet over at Pip Moyer.
But the
Okay.
quasi judicial boards may be
Oh,
required to hear?
yeah.
meet?
Yes.
But, and to clarify, that the legislation specifies just teleconferencing, not video conferencing. So would there be a capability in this chamber to have a teleconference with a member? I'm just trying to get clarification.
Again, the challenge there is actually tying the audio system into a telephone call. So currently, as it exists right now, I don't have that ability.
Okay.
That could potentially be accomplished for, you know, lesser expense than, you know, what we're talking about as far as, you know, to give you guys an idea. I mean, what I've seen implemented in larger municipalities, larger companies would be, you know, voice tracking cameras, the things that move on their own, things of that nature. You know, there's off-the-shelf solutions to do that for smaller rooms, like for you know, maybe like a large conference room rather than a council chambers type thing. But again, it's not really in my wheelhouse as far as, you know, my breadth of knowledge. I would want to consult someone else on that. But if you simply amongst yourself decided that a phone call was acceptable, I think that the engineering that would be involved to tie the microphone system and the audio into a conference call would be a lesser expense, but again, would need to be contracted out.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said if we decide, I guess first we have to decide if the teleconferencing would even be acceptable. Technologically, it sounds like it would take some effort and money possibly, might be able to do it, but just in general, I'm not sure. As I think the way this is worded, it would kind of allow anybody for no reason just to, as many as they wanted to, just to call in and do a meeting, and I don't think that would be productive. I could see in certain emergency, extreme cases, but I don't think it really has been. I'm not aware of any instance where it's been a huge problem.
The only problem has been that we've had a lot of boards and commissions that have not been able to generate a quorum. And the argument had been someone could do it if, you know, from their hotel room in San Diego with this really complicated kind of stuff.
If somebody kept the boards filled during the last administration,
I
that might
think
not be an issue.
that's the solution. The pinch that we're in, not to keep Ryan here too much longer, is I almost think we need to tonight offer a substitute piece of legislation, which would be a resolution that would contain the language to take care of your circumstances. Brian's pretty confident he can make you whole in this, and I think you have had a conversation with him. And we're not only going to have to offer on Monday a substitute piece of legislation, we're going to have to suspend the rules because there's not going to be another meeting. So I think you're right, Sheila, we have two different issues. I think on the grander scale, I'm not ready for this for the reasons you're saying, and I don't think the technology is ready, and I think there are some unintended consequences, some bad incentives by having this available. So I would really be inclined to vote in opposition to passing this.
So that was what I've deducted, that we want to give 01218 an unfavorable recommendation.
For two
Um,
reasons. One, the technology's not there, and the other, that there's some possible adverse incentives or perverse incentives.
And thirdly, it's a financial obligation
Yep.
that hasn't been accounted for. So if this legislation were to go forward, the maker of the legislation, the
The mayor.
sponsor, the mayor would have to come up with a mechanism for paying for this. And I don't know whether there's a fiscal impact. There is a fiscal impact statement. This legislation does not produce a fiscal impact. Well, we know
Wrong.
that's not true.
We gotta
Okay,
do
so-
something about those statements. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I love.
So we know that's not accurate. So what I'm hearing is that we want to give an unfavorable recommendation to 01218.
Mhm.
And Takia, for 3 reasons. One being the technology is not, we don't have the capable technology to do this.
We do not currently own it. That would, it's one thing to say the technology's not there. That, I would be careful with that language, because clearly the technology exists.
Right.
We do not currently own it.
Okay,
Would
we
be the
don't
way to
currently
say it, I
own the
think.
technology.
It'll be expensive.
It would have a financial impact on the city to do this,
Correct.
and there are some unintended consequences.
Not
can
my
just say.
jurisdiction, but yes.
So, anything else on why
Well,
we want to
so-
oppose this?
No, so I would certainly
Okay.
offer that motion for those reasons
A
that we
second.
oppose.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, now the other issue is a resolution that will have to be written, and whether we substitute it or we introduce it as a new resolution.
Well, we'd have to, we
Um,
would have to get it, so the agenda was already voted on today, I believe. If not, we'd have to get it.
Well, we can amend the
Okay.
agenda to add it to.
Yeah, we
Pardon?
can amend it.
Did you all do agenda review?
Right.
Okay, but,
The final went out today.
okay,
So we'd have to amend the
Yeah.
agenda, come up with a resolution, and then suspend the rules. But Brian, are there any technical things that we need to put, the resolution would be to accommodate the Alderwoman when she's recuperating, and I don't even know how much of that we want to get into. Do we need to say via Skype or anything like that?
Just because me and Mark Hildebrand are still ironing out the finer details of how we're going to get this done, I don't know that you want to specify a specific technology or software package in the resolution, but we're hoping to have something that we can take for a test drive here very, very soon, clearly before before your surgery. But yeah, I don't know that I want to necessarily be married to Skype or FaceTime or what have you until we've really ironed everything out.
Brian,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, related to that, have you looked at the county? Because I know they did this with
Pete
Smith.
Pete Smith.
Quite frankly, they made an investment that we're not prepared to make
I
financially.
mean, is there any, I mean, I imagine that's not actively used unless they, I wonder if you could borrow that from the county?
That's a question I didn't ask, and I'd be happy to ask it. But, I mean, just a quick, again, kind of non-specific technical rundown of what we're trying to accomplish for Alderwoman Finlayson is we would have a TV on a mobile stand that we would bring in here. It's a convenient spot, you being on the end down there, to park it right there. It would have a webcam mounted to it. It would have a PC, with it. What the folks here in the room would see would be her smiling face. And what the tricky part of this is that there is software out there that will actually fool software like Skype and others, video conferencing, into taking a video source that's not a camera, i.e. the feed from this room, and trick Skype into thinking that's a webcam, basically. So what we would be piping to you on our end of the Skype call or whatever it winds up being would be actually the live feed from this room minus the 5-second delay that you would have if you were just simply watching it on TV. You would be getting it piped directly to you raw from the room without it leaving here, going to Verizon or Comcast, going through their network, through the broadcast TV system. Because if you've ever spoken on like a satellite phone call or anything like that, where there's, 3/4 of a second or a second delay, it gets unwieldy at best, infuriating at worst. Everybody winds up talking over one another. 5 or 6 second delays that you would get through the television is not workable. So that's the portion of the technical aspect of this that we're trying to work through, is grabbing that feed from across the street and tricking Skype into thinking that it's a call. So that's kind of where we're at, and short of us reaching that goal, what you're going to be seeing at home is a webcam mounted to the TV. And we're working towards that, and hopefully by middle of next week we'll have a progress update for you.
So would I be able to ask questions and the like? Is it interactive, two-way?
You would be, two-way communication clearly is a must. You're going to need to be able to participate as if you were here. And again, this isn't, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, if I can be completely honest, because this isn't really my area of expertise by any means. But we've got the equipment that I think that we need to make it happen, and we're just kind of putting our heads together to see if we can make something that's workable for you with the minimum of expense.
So I'm looking for language in the resolution. And what I have so far is being able to allow our MIT department to make appropriate accommodations to allow me to participate remotely through a two-way communication.
For as long as it's necessary for recuperation.
We would have to have that.
I'm pretty
know.
confident you're going to be here on the 9th myself. I think you're going to come through in flying colors, and we're going to play pickleball on the 8th, and you're going to be here on the 9th.
Yeah, right. I've been in physical therapy for the last few days.
They're going to want you up and walking PDQ.
I know, they'll have me walking before I leave the hospital.
Right.
On the first day, they'll have me walking. The level of pain and the drug that I'll be on might be an issue.
We definitely.
Well, there's no amount of technology. There's no amount of technology in the world that's going to overcome that.
So, is there anything else that needs to go in this? I'll get this down to the law department.
I'd be happy to work with the law department to answer any questions that they might have, as far as language or what have you. Not a problem.
Great.
Okay.
Sorry to hold you longer than
Hey,
I promised.
I had to go take care of something, and I lost my spot in line. It happens.
Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so we'll have this introduced and amend the agenda on Monday night to introduce this resolution.
All right, let me know however else I can help, okay?
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
All right, take care.
Yep.
you too. Okay. So that goes back to 1118 Stanton Center lease agreement. And when I saw this, I thought this was the normal Stanton Center lease, but it's not. It is the lease for the Arundel Workforce Development Corporation to use Stanton Center space.
But it's a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're, having not read it, but they're supposed to have an office, workforce development office
Yeah.
within our Stanton Center.
Yeah, it shows it on their diagram.
Actually, we got an invitation to the grand opening. One
Well, we
day
better
this
have him pass this then.
I know. It's Thursday, I believe, is this week.
Oh, well.
I assume this is a regular boilerplate contract. It's long enough. It's like 17 pages, 18 pages. And in all honesty, I haven't read every word of it.
I only skimmed it, but I assumed that it, like you, that it was our standard. It's Ashley. This is, if she's not gonna get it right, we're never gonna get it right.
Yeah. I assume there is no charge for this spade.
It's $1
$1
in exchange for
spade.
$1.
Okay. So what is your pleasure?
I move we recommend a favorable approval.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of ordinance 1118?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimously recommended. And I think that exhausts our agenda.
Yeah, but we don't have Fred here to...
I guess you guys have to stay till he gets here. Huh? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.